You don't want to get to the end of this funnel. So stay tuned to find out why.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is an educational episode.
Hey, I'm Chris Sard.
And I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
And on this week's show, we want to talk about the 10 reasons why you should be killing your customers and why that might be the best strategy for your startup. We're going to talk about all the reasons why partnering with customers and distribution partners can be a terrible, terrible mistake, what you should do instead, and walk you through some case studies about where this has gone really well and where it's gone really badly. This is a really important one. I bump into way too many founders who are partnering and selling to the wrong customers and are completely derailing their startups. And whenever we talk about it, people tend to get their backups and tend to try to defend their position. We're going to go through this in thorough detail and explain to you why it doesn't work. All this and much, much more right after the break. Stay tuned.
It's a metaphor, folks. Do not kill your customers. Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. And it gets even better. Just for TSP listeners, you can get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
All right, Yaniv, so we wanted to get into this topic, the 10 reasons why killing your customers may be the best business strategy for your startup. Nothing if not provocative.
Just before we get started, I'm assuming we're not being literal here, Chris, because, this is a safe for work podcast. Don't kill anyone, please.
Yes, I thought you meant not literally like killing their companies, but yes, we should definitely disclaim that you should not be murdering people. That is definitely one of the disclaimers we want to make.
Murder is bad.
Yes.
In 2025, sometimes I feel you have to remind people of that.
Yes, that's right. It's not an obvious statement anymore. Yaniv, we've talked about this in a couple of different ways in the past, but we haven't quite gone at it in this particular way. So let me explain. So, we've discussed the topic of why B2C is often a better strategy than B2B2C. There's an episode in our back catalog called Driving Disruption with Matt Home. We've talked about the idea of full stack ownership and how startups should avoid relying on other incumbents to get their go-to-market, to build their technology. And we've talked about the idea that partnerships can really be a struggle. There's a phrase I like, which is partnerships are like peeing your pants. It feels good at the beginning, but then you realize you've made a terrible mistake. And so the question is, and there I'm specifically talking about distribution partnerships, relying on partners to try to take you to market. And whether you call it B2B2C or you call it a distribution partnership, there are differences between those two things. But in both cases, you're relying on an incumbent, someone else, to take you to market. Sometimes that person is paying you. Sometimes you're partnering with them and doing some kind of revenue share or other business model. But in both cases, there's an intermediary between you and the end user, the user you're trying to reach. And typically you're doing that because the end user you're trying to reach, you're trying to change their experience of the world in some way. You're trying to improve their experience ordering a car, buying a widget, traveling overseas. You're trying to make that experience better. And very often you're partnering with this intermediary because you believe it's easier, so that maybe they'll pay you money up front. They will help you to get to break even more quickly. They already have the users. They already have the brand. They already have the credibility. They already have a sales force. So you look at this big enterprise customer, this big brother, this distribution partner, this intermediary, this facilitator, and you go, well, geez, Yaniv, I don't know why we would spend the money to go after them direct. What we wanted to do today is go really, really deep on the series of reasons why you should not think of that facilitator, that partner, that enterprise customer as a savior, as a fast track, as the easy path, but actually why they're more likely to be much, much harder than you ever possibly imagined and possibly kill you before you even get to market.
So kill them first, right, Chris? All right, I can't wait to get into this one. I know you have a lot of thoughts. I have quite a lot of thoughts on this as well. So this is one of the most common mistakes both of us see. And we'd love to get in deep and explain why it's so easy to get this wrong.
Yeah, so let's define kill for a second. And I'm going to go back to these examples a few times. Imagine if Uber decided to partner with or sell to taxi companies instead of essentially killing them. Taxi companies are still around, but they were heavily, heavily disrupted by Uber. They kind of killed the entity that could have been their customer, the customer of their fancy dispatch software. Imagine if Netflix had partnered with Blockbuster to sell them some kind of DVD rental CRM software instead of literally killing Blockbuster, right? That's what I mean by killing your customers. Another word for killing is disrupting, right? We often talk about Silicon Valley style disruption. This is precisely what we mean. We mean upending the status quo and very often killing or maiming incumbents. And so when you look to second, third, fourth tier ecosystems and they're partnering with or selling to the incumbents, they're kind of missing a trick. They're missing the point of disruption, in particular when they're trying to disrupt the industry that those incumbents are in. Now, if you're selling Notion to enterprises because you want to disrupt, I don't know, Atlassian, well, okay, you're disrupting Atlassian and you're selling Notion to businesses. There's some disruption there. But if you're Uber and you're trying to disrupt the experience of taking a ride, partnering with taxi is often not the way to do that. And this episode, again, just to recap the theme, we're going to give you 10 reasons why it plays out that way. So let's get into it. The first reason you shouldn't go to that taxi company, that DVD rental company to deliver your new taxi or rental innovation is because the people at that company are unlikely to understand your innovation. They're subject to this classic idea of like, oh, you want to send DVDs over the mail? Like, that sounds dumb. We have 100 retail locations all around the country. People come to us. I don't get what? No, people don't get their DVDs in the mail. Why is that innovative? I don't understand. How many people said about Uber? I don't get it. It's taxis with an app. The taxi company can build an app, and the taxi company built an app, and they launched an app, and it's just Uber with an app. It's just taxi with an app, right? So I don't get what the innovation here is. And more, maybe more importantly, classic innovative dilemma, I'm afraid of this innovation. This innovation scares me. My business model works just fine. Thank you very much. I don't need or want this clever thing. I just want to go home to my kids, and I don't want to get fired. I don't want to go out on a limb. I don't want to work very hard. Leave me alone.
Now, in a way, this is the best case scenario, Chris, because you're getting a clear signal from these folks that they're not interested in working with you and that your wonderful idea to partner with them is not such a wonderful idea after all. So if you take that message and you're like, oh, okay, this probably means Chris was right, and you go back to a different, more direct distribution plan, then that's not a bad outcome. But I think the danger here, I'd be interested in your thoughts, is you're like, oh, what I'm hearing from the market is my innovation is too innovative, so I need to go back to the drawing board and do something less innovative, something that molds itself more closely to the existing business model. And that's when your world-changing disruptive opportunity becomes a niche B2B productivity product, and you never get that outcome that you were hoping for.
Yeah. And, so many people are critical of this approach, this message that I share. I share on LinkedIn a lot. And you're like, oh, perfectly great businesses are built this way, Chris, and you're gatekeeping. And if you are trying to disrupt the way cars are requested, the way DVDs are rented, the way people can rent their homes, the way people live their lives, then you're not satisfied with building some middle-of-the-road, mediocre B2B productivity app. But you're right, Yaniv, you will fit yourself into a box, and you'll build a whole bunch of enterprise garbage trying to convince them that your thing is ready for their adoption, stuff that doesn't actually end up helping the end user that you were so passionate about helping.
There's this famous Henry Ford quote that I'm sure everyone has heard, which is where he says, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And, I think that quote's actually overused quite a lot, but this is the perfect place to use it, Chris, which is if you're trying to build a disruptive technology and you're taking it to the incumbents and then they don't understand how to use it, but they're going to come back and say, this is how we do things at the moment. Build a thing that fits into the existing incumbent way of doing things. And so very much that's going to be the faster horse. So we talk about listening to your customer feedback a lot, but if you go down this road, the customer feedback you're going to get is be less ambitious, be less disruptive, be less different, fit into the way things are already being done. That is literally the customer feedback you're going to get. And if you take that to heart, then that's what you're going to build, something that is not changing the status quo in any meaningful way.
Yeah, which is why this whole episode and the original post is based on is called Kill Your Customers. And another way of saying this is you have the wrong customers. So, often a founder will come to me for advisory support and they'll be like, hey, our customer said they need XYZ. And it's like, yeah, but that's the wrong customer. Why would you listen to them at all? You haven't selected your customer correctly. Now, let's say you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, ha ha ha, Chris, you ignorant man, you don't know anything at all. I have found the unicorn advocate, the amazing, innovative thinker inside this large incumbent who gets what I'm doing. They're my champion. They're going to take me to the rest of the executive team. They're going to carry me through the organization. They get it, and they're going to help me. The problem then, this is now bullet 2 about why this is a bad idea, is your poor, lowly, innovative champion is in the wrong business. They're going to get laughed out of the room or have their initiative slow walked by most of the people around them. So even if you cross the chasm from point number 1, which is that the person you're talking to at this big company or this incumbent company is unlikely to get it. Let's say I'm wrong. Somebody at the company gets it. You're going to bump into problem number 2, which is the people around that somebody are still going to struggle to get it. They're going to slow walk it, or they're going to ultimately kill the initiative because it's going to be not going to be that interesting to the rest of the company. So that's number 2 reason why you should kill your customer.
Yeah, I think, we talk about this internal champion. That's what you're saying. You've spoken to someone, you have an internal champion. But again, if you're trying to disrupt or make meaningful changes to the way business is done, then an internal champion is unlikely to be enough unless that person is the CEO. And even then it can be hard.
Even then, yeah.
But if it's anybody else, then they are going to be internally, they're going to be pushing shit uphill. Now, I'm not going to go and say there's a 0% chance that they will be successful. I'm saying that the probability is low. I'm saying even if they are ultimately successful, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be slow. It's going to be gummed up in the works. And so even your best case scenario is not that good. Just because this person thinks they can do it doesn't mean they will be able to. And, there's this term, which frankly, Chris, I've always mocked a little bit, which is the intrapreneur, right? This idea of a person who is trying to change things from within. And to me, it's a fool's errand, right? I was thinking of that because you said that person is probably in the wrong job, right? The only person who can really change things at a large company is the leadership of that company. And even then, not easily. Anybody else has a snowflake's chance in hell.
Yeah, and as you said about point number 1, your best case scenario is they just say no outright. The worst case scenario is they think about it and they give you terrible requirements and send you in the wrong direction. For point number 2, the best case scenario, the people around your champion just kill the idea outright. The worst case scenario is they slow walk it, they go through endless meetings, they discuss it, they debate it, and your terrible no outcome comes, 2, 3, 5, 10 months later. It's really, really bad. Point number 3, you might be listening to us and saying, no, you, Chris and Yaniv, you guys don't get it. Not only do I have a champion, that champion has convinced all the people internally. This project has momentum. It's going. They've made commitments. They've signed letters of intent. They've even signed contracts, Chris. You guys don't know what you're talking about. So point number 3 is even if it starts to gain momentum with this distribution partner or this large enterprise customer, remember the thing that's gaining momentum is an effort to change the business and change the industry with your innovative idea. It will still likely be killed at some point before it launches because the KPIs change, the market conditions change, the management changes, the whims of the management change. And so 2, 3, 5, 10, 24 months later, they're just going to change their mind. They're just, whatever, that one's not that important. Let's kill it.
I think this is extremely common. And Chris, I know you like to somewhat speak in extremes, but I think it's actually even more important because what we're talking about here is this funnel of doom to say they will probably change their minds in the same way that the champion will probably get no traction. The worst case scenario is actually they do say yes. Actually, management does go ahead with it. And like I said, I think of it as this funnel of doom where eventually you spend all of this time and energy being funneled to the wrong place. I love that old joke about bacon and eggs, right? Where they say the chicken's involved, but the pig's committed. And I think one of the things here is when you're a startup, you're always the pig. You're always fully committed. But when you are dealing with a much larger organization, you're doing a partnership, they have hundreds of irons in the fire. They are doing all sorts of different things. There's internal politics, jockeying for positions, budget changes, and so on. The odds that they will change their mind are really high. And so you spend all this time working with them and they say, yes, yes, yes. And then one day you pick up the phone and they're like, oh, that person, your internal champion, is no longer in this department.
Yes.
Now what? Right? So they are never committed, right? They might say they are, but until the thing is out there, and even then, the level of commitment that is going to be displayed by a large organization partnering with a small organization, that imbalance, that asymmetry is always going to be there, and it is always going to be to the detriment of the smaller party, and that's you.
And you've hit on two key points here, Yaniv, and I love it very much. Number one, this is a funnel of probabilities. I'm often fond of saying to my founders, no one can guarantee success for you. My job is try to maximize your probabilities and to help point you at actions, behaviors, mindsets that are just going to maximize your probabilities. And so what we're talking about here is high probability negative outcomes that when you multiply them together gets you to basically zero. It's the chances of it actually getting through that whole funnel is almost zero. And you're right, you alluded to this, so we'll get to it. It's you're ruining the punchline on me, Yaniv.
Sorry, bro.
At the very end, you don't want to get to the end of this funnel. So stay tuned to find out why. And the other thing you're pointing to and reminding everybody of that's listening is this is about early stage startups, right? If you're Uber and you have a partnership program with Hilton to promote Uber to Hilton customers, that's different. Uber's already winning. Uber's already massive. Uber's already can win or lose that deal. It comes to life. It doesn't matter. They have standard rails, standard programs, they have equal centers of gravity. Completely fine for Uber to have a partnerships team trying to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. We're talking about an early stage startup with an existential bet on a distribution partner or customer go-to-market strategy. The next probable problem you're going to run into is, let's imagine you squeeze through the eye of the needle and you get through your champion, through the rest of the executive team. They manage to keep the same KPIs. The market conditions don't change too much. And you manage to actually ship something to market with this customer or with this partner. They are unlikely to implement this amazing innovation that you had in your head at the beginning of this journey the way you want them to implement it. Okay. So let me give you an example. This is all, by the way, from very personal experience. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram were succeeding in a huge way in disrupting media back in the day. And all the major media companies were coming to my company, Echo, to give them infrastructure, real-time databases, real-time query languages, real-time JavaScript widgets to build their own social media or social platforms, their first-party owned social experiences, so they could control the audience. They could send their audience to their own websites, their own apps, and not send them to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And after months of negotiation, months of sales, months of implementation discussions, months of implementation, months of launch planning, they would launch shit. They would launch garbage social networks with garbage login experiences, with garbage profiles, with garbage moderation policies, and these owned properties would fail. So it would take forever to launch, and they were in no way competitive to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And so we managed to squeeze through the eye of the needle, try to deliver these disruptive social experiences that were bespoke made for WWE and CNN and Disney and ABC, only to create some kludgy clone of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, because those guys didn't have to depend on all the legacy bloat and bullshit from these legacy media companies. So point number 4, if you manage to launch something, the first implementation, the thing that gets into the wild, is probably going to be shitty.
So here's the interesting thing, and maybe a subtext here, and perhaps another spoiler, Chris, so I'm sorry if it is. What we're seeing here is, if you've ever worked for a big company, you know that they have a lot of disadvantages. They are slower, they are less decisive, they are generally delivering things to a lower average quality, and things like this, right? Now, big businesses have a lot of advantages. And I think what happens when you're a startup looking to partner with a business is you're looking at all the advantages, their distribution, their money, their incumbency, all of that, and forgetting all of the disadvantages, which is the slow moving, the politics, the lack of conviction, and so on. And you're hoping you'll get all the good stuff and none of the bad stuff. And one of the things that tends to happen is you get all of the bad stuff, and the chance that you get the good stuff, the ability to capitalize on their distribution and their incumbency, is relatively low, right? So if you've worked at a big company, you know they are slow and indecisive. If you, as a startup, hitch your wagon to a big company and are fortunate, or actually, as we're saying, unfortunate enough to get through the front door, to be working on a partnership with them, you are going to inherit all the bad things about a big company. And that, for a startup, is fatal, right? If you try to run your startup like a big company, it is fatal. But if you hitch your wagon to a big company, even if that's not what you think you're doing, that is what you are doing. You are dooming yourself to run your early stage, poorly funded, under-resourced startup as though it was a big, hulking behemoth. And that is a story that rarely ends well.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's also not just big companies, it's incumbent companies, companies that work or are invested in the incumbent way the industry works. It's almost worse if it's a small company, because you think that they have a database or some influence or brand, and they don't even have that. And yet but they're still old people, or they don't understand software, they don't understand iteration, they don't understand any of this stuff. And so you're even small incumbents. If there's, that saying from the social network, if they were going to invent Facebook, they would have invented Facebook. If they were going to disrupt logistics, they would have invented Uber. If they were going to break their industry, they would be doing that. They wouldn't be partnering with you to do that, or it's unlikely that they have the muscle memory to know how to pivot and go do that. And so, yeah, when they finally ship it, it's going to be crap. It's going to be compromised.
Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, FlowHealth, and Quora all use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Why aren't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
So let's say we're deep in the funnel now. You've had some champion understand the innovation. You've had some group of people, large enough, influential enough people in the company, take that champion's advice and go bet on you. You've gained the momentum. You haven't suffered from a change of priority, and you've squeezed the needle and you've shipped something to market. And now you're at 0.5. Let's imagine they've shipped exactly what you wanted. It was epic. It was beautiful. You had incredible enterprise sales management, incredible partner management, incredible product management. You did a great job. The next problem is it will have taken forever to ship. And so your competitors who are going direct to that customer, who are disrupting that industry, are moving way, way faster than you. They're just getting stuff out the door. They've got the first version in market. They're able to learn from it. And so put aside the compromises that you've made, which was 0.4. Now you're also dealing with the delay of dealing with all the bureaucracy and all the requirements that this other partner is putting on you. So let me talk about the next couple together, because they're quite related. Even if you ship it, and maybe even ship it on time, it's unlikely that the market will want it exactly as you've shipped it, because we all know startups are learning, iterating machines. And so your first version is going to suck. Even if they shipped it exactly as you imagined it should be, even if you took the time to ship it as you wanted it, it's unlikely to work. It's not going to work, because nothing works the first time, almost nothing. And so you will have taken a long time, you will have shipped it, and it probably won't work, which will be a huge letdown for everybody.
And actually, that one is right in the fields, because it gets even worse than that. Yes, exactly so. And to my point, the advantage of early stage startups is you can iterate quickly. You're doing something relatively new. Your first attempt isn't going to work very well, but that's okay, because you build it quickly, and then you can build the next version quickly, and the next version, and the next version. But here's what happens when you partner, and I've had this experience, right? You go through all of this painful experience of the funnel of doom, the top half of the funnel of doom. You get your internal champion, you get the team to say yes, you partner with them to start building a thing. It all takes a very long time. Eventually, hallelujah, you get it out to market. And what happens? It bombs. And so you're like, great, next iteration. But the other company doesn't see it the same way. They say, oh, we tried this and it didn't work. We're really disappointed. Our internal stakeholders aren't happy with the outcome. And all of the momentum evaporates. And what you end up with is a shit dud product that, in the worst case, and it's usually the worst case, you even have to continue to maintain. You can't even just turn this thing off, because you probably signed a contract because it's an incumbent and they do things that way. And so, you have to maintain this thing for the next 12 months, even though it is not delivering any value to anybody. So just be aware of that. This one is is a really brutal reality, which is you kind of only have one shot in most cases to make this thing work. And one shot is rarely enough. So again, next step in the funnel of doom.
Yeah, so let's make those explicit. So step 6 in the funnel of doom is even when they ship it, they're unlikely to market it or sell it well because they don't know how, and it's unlikely to succeed. And then point 7, even if they do all of the above, they ship it great, they ship it fast, they know how to market it, you will be unable to rapidly test and iterate on the implementation details and the marketing messages, which will cause your product to at best suffer and at worst fail because you have to iterate. So we are now 7 steps in the funnel of doom. They've shipped something and you cannot iterate on it, which is what a startup with a new disruptive product must do. Iterate on the product and iterate on the go-to-market messaging and tactics.
I wanted to add a little corollary to all this as well, which is the harder you had to try to make this partnership happen, the worse all of this is going to be. And this might seem counterintuitive because as a founder, you are used to the struggle. You are used to the hustle. You're like, God damn, they said no 5 times, but I finally got them to say yes. And in a lot of things, like in sales, that is fantastic, right? That persistence pays off. I got the sale. I made the hire because I didn't give up. Well, in a partnership, if you don't give up, maybe they will say yes, but they won't mean yes, right? There won't be that internal buy-in because you only just got over the line. All of that rejection is a sign of a lack of enthusiasm, and that lack of enthusiasm will come back and bite you all the way along this process. So, this is what I've seen so often is like, you feel so proud of yourself that you landed a bigger partner. You're punching above your weight, right? There's this big partner. You don't know why they should partner with you, but they've said yes. And it's because of your amazing hustle. And you're so happy and you're so excited. But you are like a flea on the back of that elephant. And they may have said yes because it was easier than saying no, but they're not going to put any of their muscle into it and it's going to fail.
Yeah, you're like the dog that caught the car. It's like, oh shit, what do I do now? All right, so point number 8 in our funnel of doom. Once they launch it and you fail to iterate on it and it's suffering or it's weak or the market conditions change or the initial rollout fails, it fails to live up to its potential. Now it's gone from potentiality to reality. And they have to deal with the grind of iterating and figuring out why sales isn't working and why is it, and like, oh, you want us to change the funnel now? And oh, wait, well, our sales team are used to selling this and now they're not selling that. And they're incentivized to sell this. It's like, oh my God. What will happen is, as you just alluded to earlier, Yaniv, their appetite will evaporate. They are going to basically say, our internal stakeholders aren't happy. We're going to have to put this on the back burner, put it on ice, shut it down, blah, blah, blah. And as you've already alluded to, Yaniv, it's going to cost you to maintain it, or it has already cost you to build it, and you've run out of runway, run out of goodwill, run out of everything. And it will kill you. And if it doesn't kill your business, it'll kill your morale and your spirit, and it'll leave you bewildered and lost.
So grim.
Real grim. The last step in the funnel of doom, and here's the real clincher, here's the twist, the prestige. After you've done all of that, chances are what you're doing is a white label solution. It's something where the incumbent has a great deal of control over the branding, the messaging, or at the very least, you have shared custody or they have exclusive custody of the user. Because it's the Nike photo wall, it's the Blockbuster DVD rental program, it is the Yellow Cabs dispatch software, right? Therefore, you do not own the user. You don't own the market. You have not aggregated the demand. You do not have the right to upsell or cross-sell that user. You don't have the right to invent new products or learn from or talk to that user. You do not have the right to aggregate that user and funnel them through network effects. Oh, if you like this taxi, maybe you'd like that taxi. You like this DVD, maybe you'd like that DVD. You like this widget, maybe you'd like to buy that widget. You have no network effects. Maybe you have them within a silo, within a customer or partner, but you don't have them across your network. And you don't benefit from them, the customer does or the partner does. The most powerful idea that software, internet software, ever created was flywheels and network effects. and the idea that's called demand aggregation, aggregating a community of people who have a particular kind of problem. So in the old world, it was all about supply aggregation. If you are a lumber distributor, you would go aggregate all the sources of lumber and you'd sell it to anyone who wants to buy lumber. Lumber, lumber, lumber all day long. I sell lumber. In the modern internet world, the hardest thing in the world is to aggregate demand. And the moment you find people who want to buy lumber, you want to then start selling them glass for their windows and concrete for their pathways and loans so that they can finance their homes and all sorts of other shit, which you cannot do if you don't own the user. And they don't know your brand. They don't know your promise. They don't know anything about you. You are stuck behind an intermediary, which massively craters your equity value and your degrees of freedom.
I agree. White label is kind of a desperate move. It's generally something that happens when you realize that you're a little bit screwed, right? Where you're like, oh, okay, I am utterly dependent on others for distribution. And so I'm just going to create a little widget that plugs into their thing and sell that to them and just, I was going to say capitalize on their distribution, but that's not even true to your point. Simply have some value as a result of their distribution, and none of the real value accrues to you. Now, there are subtleties here, right? There is a distinction, I would say, between B2B2C and then white label, right? Where we're basically saying, I've got an idea for a product, but I am not able to distribute it myself, so I'm going to rely on others for distribution. And the terminus of that is white label. It's not a very nice place. And creating user-facing tools for businesses, right? There is a distinction there. Like sometimes you're like, I'm building a particularly complex module, for example, a CMS or something, content management system, and all of that content is going to be exposed to the end user, but the customer is very clearly the business, right? That is different. What we're talking about is it's effectively a product that you're embedding inside someone else's product. And so with white label especially, that distinction can get a bit fuzzy. But I think the question you need to ask yourself is, would this thing be better if it stood on its own? Would it have all of these benefits that you talk about, the analytics, the understanding of users, the ability to upsell, cross-sell, brand, get the flywheels going, if it were a standalone product, but it just so happens that it's not? Well, then you've white labeled, and then you have massively capped your ability to grow, to have impact, and to really create a great product, Chris. I think what you mentioned there, it was a little bit implicit, but let's be explicit about it. If you don't get that feedback from data, from talking to users, even from experimenting with pricing, from all of that, that is the oxygen that allows you to iterate and improve the product. And so that is one reason why white labeled products will never be as good as the direct to consumer products, because that data is simply not there. You have cut yourself off from it, right? And so you're going to be living in this weird subterranean twilight where, you've got a product that kind of works because your B2B customers are going to pay for it, but you're not really in a position to know how to make it better. And also, even if you did, your incentives are not well aligned, because your incentive is simply to make sure that you can continue to sell to your businesses rather than create a delightful end user experience.
I want to add some specificity there. If you are implementing your B2B2C disruption through a third party, you will be unlikely to be able to iterate. Maybe because the data is not there, but mostly because the third party doesn't want you to iterate. They don't want you changing shit on their pages, right? On their distribution channels. So your degrees of freedom to iterate will be constrained by policy, maybe less so by data. That will produce a shittier product because you can't iterate, and because of all the constraints they added on as you were building the bloody thing, and to fit into their legacy business. What you'll also end up with white label is a worse business. Not necessarily a worse product, although it will be that, but a worse business, because you're selling software to an incumbent. You're not building a direct-to-customer business where you own that customer, and that's where all the value is. And so you have to understand that this is what I call empty calories. It's like eating sugar instead of eating a nutritious meal. You might be driving transaction volume, you might be driving transaction fees, you might be driving shitloads of revenue because you've gotten through the funnel of doom, and you're a fucking amazing entrepreneur, and you've got it all done, and you're producing thousands, millions, billions of transactions and dollars. But you don't own the user. And so you have this really arm's length relationship and a lot less degrees of freedom. And frankly, your business is just worth less. It just is. Let's talk about what you should do instead, Yaniv. Let's talk about some practical things you should be doing instead of these 9 or 10 steps of doom. And let's talk about some case studies about real world examples in the wild. What you should do is very simple. You should go straight to the end user. If you have something that's innovative, disruptive, different, and will change the way a legacy industry works, you're an early stage company, you should go straight to the end user. And now everyone in the audience, or a lot of people in the audience go, oh, Chris, that's more expensive, it's more risky, it's more whatever. We're going to include a link in the show notes to my a study that shows that B2C is not more risky than B2B. That's an illusion. One of the main reasons it's not more risky is because of the funnel of doom we just went through just today. The second step is disrupt those legacy players. Don't partner with them or sell to them. Don't think of them as partners. Don't think of them as customers. Don't think of them at all, except that they're in your way and that you want to market and message against them, not with them. And then later down the road, you might offer an SDK or an API or a widget that those third-party incumbents can choose to pick up and use after you've won, after you've already demonstrated that your way is better. So let's talk about some case studies of where this has happened. Think of YouTube disrupting major media companies and then giving them a little YouTube player to embed on their sites and their own branded YouTube channels. Think of Instagram creating their own social network, visual social network, where Nike and Adidas and Disney play and participate. And then you can use their API to grab some of that content and put it on their own properties. They also promote Instagram, by the way, on their air. Think of Twitter versus the news business. They didn't go and help news businesses create little breaking news feeds. They created Twitter, and all of the media companies came to them to do their breaking news. And now you can embed tweets on the major media companies. They're branded tweets, or the branded X's, who the fuck cares? Think of Uber with taxi. Obviously now taxi is inside Uber, but Uber is not powering the taxi company. Think of Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster is dead, who cares? But many of the major media companies came to Netflix to distribute their content before trying to build their own direct-to-consumer businesses. Another good one is Shopify versus Amazon. Both of them are incredible success stories, incredible Silicon Valley companies. But if you look at the enterprise value, the market cap of Amazon versus Shopify, there's no comparison, because Shopify is the white label tool. Now they're trying to build shop.com and the shop app and shop pay, and they're trying to poke their head above the waterline and build a direct relationship with the consumer, because that's where the market cap, the enterprise value ultimately is. And so that's another great case study of a very successful company that went the indirect route through small business owners and helped them build a white label product.
Can I take issue with that last one? Because I think it's actually, A, I disagree, but B, the way in which I disagree, I think is quite illuminating and might create an interesting debate here, Chris. I do not believe that classifying Shopify as a white label product is completely accurate. It's not a full product that is baked into someone else's business. It is a tool that other businesses can use to leverage it. It's a platform for those businesses, right? Would you say Stripe is white label, right? These are all utilities. And as you say, there is incredible value accrued to Shopify. Now, Shopify, by the way, a Canadian company, not a Silicon Valley company. Yay to our friends north of the border. But it's an incredibly valuable company. So you can't say that Shopify have gone down this funnel of doom, right? They've been incredibly successful. Less successful than Amazon, yes, but they are not an example of this white labeling. They are an example of a B2B that has a user-facing component to it, right? Which is why I've talked about that distinction when we're talking about white label. I think Shopify is a perfect example of that distinction. But yes, what you're saying is it is very difficult to go from what they've done, which is they do not own distribution, I agree with that, to trying to own distribution where there is even more value. I don't think Shopify Shop has really worked very much. I don't see that it ever will. But to say that Shopify have gone down the funnel of doom and poor old them, I wouldn't agree with that at all.
No, what I would say is that Shopify is a breathtakingly elegant and beautiful example of going through the funnel of doom and surviving. They've done every single thing right, and they are the right kind of product in the right kind of space to do it the way they've done it, to build a kind of an off-the-shelf CMS for e-commerce. And I think it worked very, very well. And I think it's an incredible business. But it's also a business that shows you sort of the limits of that kind of business. So it's massive, massive limits. And they've executed it perfectly. And it's the exact right kind of software to deliver that way, right? It's really kind of more B2B than B2B2C. It is a perfect example of a business that should be built that, or could that be built that way. But they're experiencing the limits of that business because they don't own the end user. And so you can see them with the examples I just gave you with Shop and Shop Pay and all this other stuff. They're trying to grasp out and access the user because of that last point that we talked about, which is if you don't have access to the user, you are in a really suboptimal position. And so I agree with you, Yaniv. No one here is saying Shopify is a crap business and they shouldn't have done it that way. I'm saying they're the perfect example of doing it as a B2B business. And even they are trying to grasp for the end user for that point number 10 in the funnel of doom.
I would say if Toby and the Shopify team went back to day one and said, how would we do this differently? I'm not sure they would do it differently because they never really had a chance of taking Amazon on head on anyway. They've built a very valuable business in a very large niche that is nonetheless a niche that is smaller than all of retail, right? And the value that they capture is less than the value that Amazon captures, and they're scrambling now from a different place. But I don't think that is the core issue that we're describing here, which is something much, much worse, right? So I don't want to weaken the argument where people say, well, we might not be Amazon, but we'll be Shopify. It's like, no, you don't even get a chance to be Shopify because you're doing something much more problematic than what Shopify ever did.
All right, so that is the 10-step funnel of doom. If you want to go get a recap, you can see that in the show notes, along with a link to my B2B to B2B2C comparison table that'll help you understand why one is not more risky than the other. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Spotify has comments, YouTube has comments, and if you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, jump over there and check us out there. We'll join you down there and have a discussion, have a debate, and help refine each other's thinking.
So Chris, I know you're passionate about helping startups avoid getting into the funnel of doom. And so if you're worried that you might be accidentally stepping into that funnel, it's bloody hard to get out, and you want some help coming up with a really great strategy. Chris, I know you love to help people with this. How can they potentially work with you?
Yeah, you can learn more about my advisory work over at chrissaad.com/advisory. Or if you're not ready for that, subscribe to my newsletter over at chrissaad.com/newsletter, where you'll hear about this kind of content early and often. Yaniv, how can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn trying to make it a less boring place. So I love getting connections from TSP listeners. I've gotten a few in the last week. Just let me know in the invite that you're a listener and I will happily accept it.
All right. Great conversation as always, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Fantastic, Chris. Have a good one. Avoid the funnel of doom, everybody.
And don't forget, before we wrap up, you've got to honor the Startup Podcast Pact, which says if you've been listening to a few episodes and getting value, we only ask for a few things in return. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and in your favorite podcasting app. Follow us on your favorite social network and give us a shout out. It helps us grow the show, feed the algorithm, and help more founders like you. Thanks for listening.
Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies already use Vanta. Why don't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.